Hello, everyone, and welcome to this beautiful conversation. I am joined by my beautiful sister, Amber Wolfmoon. We've known each other for almost 4 years now,
Yeah.
which is pretty amazing. She's a somatic relational therapist and an embodiment and sacred ceremony facilitator. And grief is such a big part of the work that she does in the world. And
Mm.
she's also walked such a profound journey, pilgrimage with grief in her own intimate life. And today she's going to be sharing a bit about that and walking us through her journey with grief from such a young age and
Mm.
how that's influenced her work as a somatic therapist, as well as offering us some tools and insight as to how we can meet our grief from the perspective of somatic relational therapy. So
Mm.
thank you, Amber, for being here today. It's such an honor to have this conversation and record something like this
Yeah.
um, together. I was on a walk the other day and I got pretty emotional because, in my experience of you and knowing the work that you do and the circles that you hold and the one-on-one spaces that you hold, it's it's quite profound. I've sat in various spaces with you, ceremony spaces and circles. And what I bow to you the most is the way you show up in ceremony, the way you show up in circle, the way you show up in session is the way that you show up in life.
Mm.
And it's not performative, it's not trying to be anything other than who you are. You know, your somatic work really is just an extension of your heart
Mm.
in its authenticity. And that to me is so rare. And it's just such an honor to have you here, that full, beauty and humanness and truth that you carry. Anyone watching, maybe you know Amber, maybe you don't, but she's just such an incredible woman. And it's so great to have you here today. So welcome.
Ah, thank you. Wow. What a beautiful welcoming. Yeah, I feel really touched and yeah, just like very open in my heart receiving those words and yeah, just feeling the mirror effect of that. Is so grateful for you and our connection and the ease of walking this path together and the depth even without like having a lot of time together. It's always been really deep when we do drop in or come to circle together ceremony, and I really value your medicine and your path. And it's amazing to just look back on these 4 years and be like, wow, we've really grown, and wow, like whew, so many different challenges, initiations, and yeah, just overall evolution with who we are, coming more into ourselves and into our medicine, into our service, and yeah, and just being by each other's side, cheering each other on through that, through the highs, the lows, the dark, the light, all of it. We're just right there, yeah, honoring the rawness, the realness, the humanness, the wholeness.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so I mean, we could just get right into it. You've had quite a journey with grief at a really young age, and one of the reasons that really kind of sparked this conversation for me, and what I thought could be so powerful was you lost your mother at such a young age, and then you lost your stepmother.
Hmm.
And me coming from the perspective of mother losing my child, I just thought the polarity of that, the contrast of that, and the pain and the beauty, and just how interesting it would be to have a conversation around grief with both of these lenses of losing a mother versus losing a child. And I
Hmm.
mean, I remember you coming to visit me really soon after Floyd had died, and we had tea and ate chocolate, and we had a big cry, and all of these layers were revealing themselves, and I didn't know then that we were going to record anything together, but But yeah, if you want to, I mean, begin your journey with like how you can remember meeting grief for the first time or meeting death in like a really intimate and big way. For the first time, you can start wherever you want.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to also light a candle. It feels appropriate to call in the spirit of my mother and my stepmother, also my one of my past partners who I was engaged to, he passed from suicide a couple years ago. And one of my babies as well, and we named her Nova. So I'm going to call in their spirits as well as Floyd, if that's okay with you.
Always okay.
And yeah, I'll light this candle in reverence for their spirits and their truth, their support, their love, um, yeah, their light, their dark, their message, their wisdom, and anything that they want to also communicate with us in this ceremony of conversation and prayer. And yeah, and for any listeners, I also want to invite you to light a candle or connect with any passed on loved ones in your own way. Just put that candle beside this picture of my mother that I have here with me as a little baby. And yeah, this picture comes with me to a lot of circles and a lot of ceremonies. And sometimes when I lead a circle, I actually have a pillow next to me that's empty, but it's her spot. And sometimes I'll put the picture on that pillow so she really feels included in the circle. And that we can still connect to passed down loved ones just because they're not physically here with us. They still want to be included. They still want us to reach out, not just in those dark, heavy times, but also in those light times. And that's been a big, big journey for me to not just feel my mother's spirit in those hard times and grief and sadness, but also when I'm in a very light resource place, it's like, come be with me, mom, and come enjoy this, and yeah, come play, come dance, come laugh. So really welcoming her spirit here with us. And also my inner child, I feel like, yeah, she's obviously a big part of this journey, as we all have our own inner child and how they comprehend death and grief and those big emotions. And some children don't have that experience. I would say growing up, I didn't have many friends that experienced having, close loved ones pass away in their childhood. So in that way, I felt like I didn't belong. I felt really isolated and that no one really understood me, and that it was more safe to kind of hide my story. There's a lot of shame that came with it, and even lying of like, yeah, I have a mom and, she's here and I'm just like all of you, but I wasn't. Yeah, so I'm trying to feel into, with my mom passing, I was 4 years old. And yeah, and I just want to also say that it's still tender. It's still vulnerable. I could feel it. This is the somatic experience. I could feel it in my throat. That's usually where grief is. I could feel it in my eyes. And then when I feel the grief response coming up through my body, it's like, okay, can I slow down to just hold my heart, to connect with my body? Can I slow down my breath? Yeah. And I feel like the more I tell the story, as you know for sure, Emma, the more we share our story, the more it brings us into connection with others, the more others can feel us, and the more light it can feel from holding it inside. So I really feel, yeah, sharing my story is important. So I was 4, and my mother chose to leave. And she was struggling actually a lot with feeling like she didn't belong. She had a lot of pain with her mother rejecting her, abandoning her, and just really yearned for that motherly love. And, she had my dad and like a great partner, and on the outside, it seemed like everything was peachy and successful, but on the inside, she was really hurting and she just felt like she didn't belong. And when she met her mother for the first time, because she was adopted, there was just that sense of rejection and no, I don't want you. So it's interesting how that kind of carried into my own experience with her choosing to leave. And there has been a lot of work around that of finding peace and honor and even even celebration of like, wow, that's quite courageous for her to leave, even though that might be hard for a lot of people to comprehend. I do believe if you feel it's your choice to leave and it's that time and you've tried everything possible, that like that's on you to choose death. So I do honor her for making that decision, and it's a part of my path, and I trust in these obstacles, these traumas, how they actually help build resilience, and how if she didn't pass at such a young age, I wouldn't have had such a strong spiritual connection at such a young age. So when she passed, Dad was like, you have an angel. Mom's not around anymore, but you have an angel. And for a 4-year-old, that's really hard to comprehend. Where is mom? There's so much confusion in my system, and then so much chaos in my nervous system of like, I still can't orient because she's my main attachment figure, and where is she? And so, yeah, even just not even knowing how she passed until a little bit later in my life, that was also a trauma on its own to find out through my dad telling one of our guests that was over that she passed in that way. I just overheard the conversation and was just, yeah, I felt really upset with my dad, felt really upset with her. And then again, it's like, how do I digest that at such a young age?
Yeah.
And that was, yeah, that was age 4.
At 4, right? You were saying that your dad said, so mom's not around anymore. You have an angel, and there was a lot of confusion, and you also shared, why she chose to leave. How did you learn about that? Was that through something that she wrote or conversation she had previous, or was that through a connection to her spiritually, or all of it?
Of how I found out she passed.
Of the reason why she passed. You said she didn't feel that she belonged, and there was like, it's like you have some intimate thoughts of hers. So I'm curious as to how you received those thoughts and those, yeah, feelings that she shared.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So when I did overhear my dad in that conversation, I remember that memory. I think I was 10 or 11. I ran as fast as I could to my best friend's house down the street. I just cried and cried, and she didn't understand. But then when I finally came home and I was still upset with dad, and he was like, "Well, it's time now to show you all of mom's things. These pearls are actually hers, and I felt to wear them today." And her letter was in there, and she wrote a letter that I really cherish. My dad actually got copies of them, so I do have her letter with me. And yeah, we read it together, and it was a really, really precious moment I shared with my dad. Yeah, it was honestly, It's wild to think, but it was one of the best experiences I have with my dad because we just were so vulnerable,
And
hold each
real.
other real, yeah, and like just to really grieve together and feel the masculine hold me, but letting me hold him. It was like, it's so memorable, it's so special, and of course, it's tender. And somehow seeing my dad cry is like such a gift. So that was really potent to have that experience. And in the letter, she specified, I just didn't receive that motherly love that I yearned for. I wanted it all of my life. I didn't have it. I don't feel like I belong here. And I love you all. And, I see the potential of all of you, and I can't be here, and I'm sorry. And yeah, that was really, really something else to read that. And I had to, in somatic work, we call it titration. So I had to really like take some time to revisit it throughout my life from that first time I read it. I think I was, yeah, 10, 12, 13, something like that. And then I kept reading it at different points of my life to digest it more, to understand it more. And then dad shared with me, of course it's tender for my dad. He was the one who found her in the state that she was when she chose to leave. And yeah, like I just asked him a lot of questions, and he said that she was on the spectrum for being bipolar, she was on a lot of antidepressants, and she heard a lot of different voices in her head from the antidepressants. And that's why, like, I do believe in some circumstances antidepressants can be supportive for a temporary time, but I also feel that's the last resort. There is so much other support out there for people who are suffering. To have that human connection is actually what she needed, is what I feel deeply inside. And that's a big part of my walk now, is I just want to create that space for others to feel seen, to be welcome, to feel like they belong, no matter what their walk is or what age or where they come from. It doesn't matter. It's like everyone is welcome and equal in the circle, as you know. So yeah, including her as a part of like her own healing, that I'm this living embodiment for her, with her, and that oneness that her and I share.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you mentioned titration. Can you uh, define that a bit more for the listeners if they don't exactly know what that is or how to do that, just before we continue on?
Yeah. Yeah. So titration is a really important piece with somatic work. And yeah, I'll just start with titration because pendulation is also connected there, but we'll just start with titration. Titration is little baby steps towards working with something that's very activating or working with our trauma. So in somatics, we are very attuned to the nervous system and not over traumatizing or overwhelming the nervous system. So we go really slow. To come into the body, we have to go really slow. And then to feel into, so an example is working with my mom's suicide letter. I kept going back to it little steps by little steps. And when I had more of that somatic embodied awareness, I was actually able to meet it. The last time I read that letter, I was able to meet it with such deep understanding, compassion, and a widened sense of awareness that I didn't have any other time. It's like everything started to land way more, and my system could take it in more because I wasn't so overwhelmed meeting it. It's a lot to read a suicide letter that your mother wrote. So it's, finding the pendulation, which this is another somatic word, sandwiching the intensity with the resource. So that last time I read her letter, I made sure I was so resourced. I sat at my altar, I, grounded with my breath, I lit candles, I smudged, and I really centered into staying in my body. And then I read just a little bit of the letter, not the whole thing, just a little bit. And then I noticed that kind of overwhelm coming up where I was crying so hard, I was like losing my breath, that shallow breathing. And that was the indication I have to slow down and come back to the resource. That's the pendulation swing. And that's the baby steps of the titration as well. I'm not going all in at once, but just little by little we tend to it. So I went back, I resourced, I came into my body, I took a few deep breaths, I oriented to nature, and then I read a little bit more. And that builds a bit more bandwidth to take in the situation that can feel very overwhelming, but there's more resilience and capacity there.
Yeah.
So I swung back and forth in that way. And then that final time I read it, because that time I was by myself, and the time after that, it was maybe like a few days later, I read it with my somatic therapist.
Mm.
And that was big for her. I could feel like that might have been some of the biggest that she held. And she was crying, and she was right there with me, and it was having that relational holding.
Mm.
This is the key. We need the relational holding with these big experiences, especially with grief. So she was there holding my shoulder, I think she was, yeah, holding my shoulder and sitting beside me. Her feet were touching me, and we just went slow. And then she would pause me, let's take a few deep breaths. Let's look around, let's widen out our view a little bit. And then we came back. And that was absolutely profound, and that was like a big jump in my healing of meeting my mom and her experience.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And as you're sharing these somatic techniques, some of them feel to me, just as I'm listening, like these very primal, like natural things that our humanness wants to do anyway. Like I've told the story of Floyd's passing many times now to like different people, and each time I connect with different layers and it feels so good. And sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's sad, sometimes there's anger, or sometimes there's like just this deep love of like, wow, he's so amazing. I love him. Like we chose each other. But each
Yes.
time I speak it and I sit with it or look at photos, it
Mm,
brings me to deeper layers of the wholeness of that experience, which feels so
yes.
powerful. And that there's not a reason for me to do that. It's just this natural desire. And I've heard other people who've experienced and who are walking with grief do the same thing, and just this piece as well of exposure therapy of like, I'm going
Yes.
to revisit that. I'm going to go to those places with specific tools in my tool belt or toolbox in order to hold that, and having that altar space to return to. And whether the altar is something you set up or the altar is your body and your heart, and you land
Mm,
here, and the beating that you can feel, the beating of your heart underneath your palm, as something to return to and come back to. Even like that's an altar for me that I do revisit all the time, and I carry it with me, and so yeah, just to have that reflection, like these seem to be things as well that just come organically and naturally to us as human beings.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like somatic work is that remembering. It is just a
Mm.
deep remembering of, yeah, what we already know, and that deeper attunement to ourself. And I really hope, even if just one person listening can open more towards the somatic path, it is the path of deeper embodiment. It is the path of greater health and vitality and deeper, relational connection. and nervous system awareness, as well as just embodying our wholeness. And that feels like a big part of my work. That's what my business is called, Grounded Wholeness, because it's like, how do we ground more into our authentic self? We are human and we're meant to experience grief and anger and sadness and fear and all those feelings that we can often resist or look away from because they can be uncomfortable, but it's a part of the whole of us. And each of those expressions or parts of who we are is important and has vital information and great medicine to share with us, especially if we just own it and express it and allow for it to be there. It actually gives permission for other people to do the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the root of somatic, right, comes from soma, meaning body. And so
Mm.
there is this like welcoming in all of these like physical experiences of emotion. And you illuminated that a little bit in the beginning where you said, yeah, grief, I can feel it in my throat. There's a tightness and I can feel it in my eyes. And as you were talking, I was feeling those exact things. I could feel like the closing of the throat, the wetness behind my eyes, even like a bit of a palpitation in my heart and like a tingling or
Mm.
a butterfly in my lower belly and goosebumps coming all over and just recognizing that these are all ways that grief is wanting to come up and move through us, and it's not
Mm.
good or bad. These emotions that accompany grief or accompany us in general are not better or worse or good or bad. They are fleeting and here, as you say, with so much information for us. And
Mm-hmm.
how can we learn to be in relationship, right?
Yes.
So relational therapy is also how can we be in relationship with this information, and there's
Mm.
so much power in that. Um,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. And so you lose your mom at 4, and then at 10-ish, you said around 10 is when you read the letter and you had this big, beautiful connection with your father.
Yeah.
And can you describe if that season is feeling complete, can you describe your stepmother coming into the picture and having, not just
Mm.
losing your mom, but now you have this other woman in your life who's a maternal figure and what that
Mm.
journey was like to open up in again and what that process was for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I also just want to share, just with like my own experience with words and language, that
Mhm.
for me it's like I didn't lose them. It's like they transitioned, and yeah, somehow when people would say like sorry for your loss, it just never landed for me, and it's like I didn't, they're not here physically, and that's hard for sure. They're gone in that way, and they're still here in a way.
Mhm.
And that's that spiritual relationship that takes time to really develop and is hard to comprehend with the mind, especially if we don't have a spiritual practice. Yeah, so just feeling like, yeah, they're not gone, they've transitioned, and that feels easier for me to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah, they changed form.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with my stepmom, she came in quite fast. Yeah, so my dad connected with her. It was like someone else connected them quite fast. And I do feel that my dad didn't just connect with this woman, my stepmom, for his sake. I know it was for myself and my brother, to have a mother in the picture. And so she came in maybe like a year or two later, like quite fast. And I just remember as she entered in, she always wanted to have a daughter, and she had two sons. And so she was obsessed with me, and I was obsessed with her, and it was like beautiful to learn the things that only a mother can teach you, that my dad obviously didn't do with me in the same way, like baking and cooking. And yeah, just having that feminine embodiment around was like so supportive for my system. right away I called her mom, and I just knew her as mom. And she was sick quite fast too. I honestly don't remember exactly what was going on with her, but I remember a lot of hospital visits. And she had to wear a mask for oxygen, something to do with her lungs. And when I think of her, I remember her drinking a big, like, bottle of Pepsi, and like diet was kind of not so healthy. So that's also been a big part of my path of eating really clean. And she was smoking cigarettes. So, yeah, it's just interesting watching her deteriorate and then pass on because of her health choices, because of those daily choices. And I feel like food is a big, big, big one, where I'm just like, no, 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 it has to be organic as much as I can, and very clean eating is like a big value in my life. So when she passed, I remember that a little bit more. Dad came to me in my bed, I think the morning of. She died at the hospital. And yeah, I just
How
remember,
how
yeah,
old were you?
I think I was 6 or 7. Yeah, so this was all within that 7 year first early time of my life, which is an interesting time of our life when the brain is still developing and attachment system is still forming, and there's already a lot of confusion in my system. So dad came to me in the morning and just said, he was crying at my bed, and he was just like, Mom Nancy is gone, and like, this is what happened. And again, like 6, 7 years old, I don't understand what that means. And he's just like, we have another angel. And yeah, I don't remember much of the words, but it's more of the feeling, and then seeing him cry, and it's like, oh, this is not good. And so there is this stale energy that was in our house for most of my childhood because of the amount of deaths that happened, especially my mom chose to leave in our house. So there is just this flat energy that was there, that was the opposite of vitality. And I know my dad, he did everything he could to make a safe space and supportive space to hold all of that whilst working like crazy hours, lots of babysitters, and lots of aunts and uncles, grandparents helping to watch me and my brother at the time. Yeah, and I feel it's important to just share like a very special memory I have with my dad shortly after this happened was he came to my bed and was like, I packed the vehicle and we're going to Disney World, and like, let's go. And so he took my brother to Disney World. And that just felt really special, of like a good way to support us is to bring us out of the house, out of that environment, and into a very happy place as a child. And I felt like he did what he could in those times, but obviously all of our nervous systems are connected, especially him being the adult. And if he wasn't having that space and time to really hold all of that, then we were feeling it. It was in the field. And I don't feel like he got enough support.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's coming through is like I can really feel how it may be more challenging for men to get that same sort of support with grief than it is for women.
Hmm.
Because it's almost like in our society and culture, it's more normal for women to be sad and to grieve, but it's not as like welcomed and encouraged for men to do the same. So, yeah, I guess that's a prayer that I really hold, is that I hope more men can find these safe spaces where they can unwind their own trauma and grief, pain, sadness, anger, whatever that is, in a safe holding. And yeah, that they can feel that there is power and strength in being vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a prayer for me as well. Yeah, I don't see enough spaces for men, to be honest. And I understand as well. I mean, even you described um, the the holding of the masculine, right? And being so connected and seeing your dad cry, but still feeling held by him,
Mm-hmm.
and how powerful that is. And then on the opposite side, on like the far spectrum on the other end, is you don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to hold for others all the time. You are also allowed to be held. And we have that
Yes.
masculine, feminine polarity within ourselves. And how can we show up within various dynamics, And again, it's kind of tricky with like a father daughter versus like a partner, you know?
Yeah.
But still in that same capacity, like how can we create these containers where we can still show up and hold the men in our lives, be they our fathers, grandfathers, husbands, like partners, boyfriends, friends, uncles, nephews.
Mm.
Like, how can we allow there to be spaces for them to be held as well? And I don't have the answers, and where we live, there are men's groups and men's circles where that is accessible, which is fantastic. But even then, I mean, there's countless women's circles, there's still the discrepancy is quite large of like, there's tons of
Yeah.
women's spaces. And even I remember speaking to a friend of mine, two friends of mine, and he was describing that there's all of these ceremonies for women when there's a baby on the way. There's closing of the bones, there's blessing
Yeah.
ways, there's like all of these ceremonies. But where's the ceremony for the initiation of being a father? and
Yes.
and all of those pieces, and he just never felt like there was enough of that. And I think part of
Mm.
his work, it really is going to be holding those spaces. But
Yeah.
I remember the acknowledgement in my mind and in my heart when he spoke that to me, and I was like, you're correct. And if there's no space for those initiations, women, when we get our bleed, there's an initiation, however it turns out, but it's like, okay, now I need to show up to this and either get period underwear, free bleed, or use tampons or pads or whatever that initiation is. But there's a distinct marker of we are entering something. For
Yeah.
men, that has been lost a little bit in our culture.
Mm.
And yeah, and it would feel so beautiful, I think, to have more of those ceremonies, because I think it would be natural then for their grief to also be held. It would be a
Yeah.
natural extension of like, you're growing up, you're becoming a man, you're becoming a father. Like, all of these rituals and ceremonies and practices, I think would just then snowball into, of course we're going to be there and hold your grief and create these spaces for
Yeah.
you as well. I is my prayer and my hope.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really hope. I hope even there's like a male watcher, just
Yeah.
something lands for them. And I really do salute and honor the men that are, out there and making space for their feelings and their wholeness to be held, especially their grief and their pain. And taking that time, it's very courageous. And yeah, and I just think about my brother and how his nervous system responded very different from mine in the passing of my mom, and that's a big part of somatic work too. It's yeah, it's almost not as much of what happened, but it's how our nervous system comprehends it, and each nervous system is so different. And what was the relational components within that experience too? Was there enough holding? And I do feel really blessed that even with those traumas, there was relational holding there. There was support there, and I'm really grateful for all of that support that I had as a child amongst all of those traumas. And I know it could have been very different if I didn't have that support. For someone like my brother, he's a bit older than me. He had more of a relationship with my mother, and he was just so shocked and shook up and angry about the situation, and just reacted through, going in that rebellious path of life, and was like rejecting all of the support that wanted to be there for him because it just was so painful for him. That was his best friend, and again, there was more of a relationship built there. So I really feel for him in that.
Was he old enough to understand how your mother died? Because you were 4, and so you knew, okay, your mom's not here, but she's an angel, so she's here in a different way, is what
Yeah,
I kind of heard you describe. And then when you were 10, you learned what
yeah,
happened and why it
yeah,
happened, and you had more insight. But your brother was
right.
older, so did he have that awareness before you did, or did you both learn together?
Yeah, he was 7. And it's an interesting one. I feel like there's some like trickster energy that my mom might have had because
Right,
she chose to leave on April Fools. So this is always an interesting day for me,
right.
especially in school where it's made into this big day of jokes and laughter and pranks. So my brother was like really feeling like it was a prank. He did not understand it on the day. Yeah, and then I think what the story was my dad shared before I overheard him say that she passed from suicide was that she took too many pills and she passed. So I believe that's what my brother understood, but it wasn't talked about so much in our family. And then, as I said, my brother kind of went on a different path where he had to go to foster homes and he just couldn't be in the house with us. And yeah, that's a
Tangent, yeah.
whole other story. But yeah, I think still to this day, I'm not fully sure, but I feel like it's still hard for him to swallow that that's the truth. I know that he eventually found out that's how, but it wasn't in the same way as me. He wasn't in our house at that time. So I know that someone would have told him the truth. But to this day, like I have offered to share with him the letter and he doesn't want to read it. So this is what I mean. I feel there's a lot of people out there, women and men, but a lot of men, it's just too much for them to break down in that way and to trust that they can be held. It's too much, and I can feel how those feelings are unbearable for a lot of people. And this is women and men. And I think in those cases, when there's a feeling inside that there's so much resistance towards the truth, it's so unbearable. It's like that's the time to call in professional support. That's the time to really call in a professional team of support, not just one person. I really feel it's like we need a body worker, we need, a somatic therapist, maybe we do need a talk counselor, and maybe we need an acupuncturist or whatever that is, a few different helpers. And I've had many different helpers, guides, and support team on my journey that have all kind of woven together to bring me into the place I am with it all now.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
something that I've heard many people say is, the resistance of not wanting to talk about something or read a letter or,
Mm.
go into those feelings is, if I start crying, I will never stop. And
Yeah.
I've heard that said so many times in various
Yeah.
articulations of it. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's a big fear is if I go into it, I'll never come out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a big fear, and I've heard that said so many times. And yeah, and I do feel in those times it's like finding someone that we trust or that we feel a resonance with, that we can hold the bigness of that together and know that a professional can support you to take those pauses, to titrate perhaps, or just to hold you in it, because when we hold it together, it's lighter, as you know.
So I am curious from like a somatic therapeutic perspective, if and just the child psychology. My brother died when I was 10, and my grandfather died. I was a few months old, but there was that grief so present in my, like, when I was in utero and in my development and all of these things. And I'm just wondering if you have any insight as to what the child mind understands death to be. Because I remember being so confused, and
Yeah.
even now, like confused by death. Like, so your heart's not beating, you're not breathing, you were here, but now you're not. Where did you go? Like, what is death? And I remember speaking to, I think, my father and many people, because I've always been so like insatiably curious. And I was like,
Hmm.
what does death mean? What does it mean? I'm confused.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, well, I don't know. And some people had some answers that were more
Hmm.
religious centric, I would say, like just centered in various beliefs, and maybe dogma and just a way of viewing it. Um, but ultimately, I just felt so confused. I was like, I don't
Yeah.
understand where they went, because the love is still here. I know that they existed. And if they go, then I'm going to go. But where do we go when that time comes? And so I'm wondering if you understand any of the child development, because right now, in your story and what I've just shared, we're speaking on a lot of like how the child mind is comprehending such a big, mysterious, like in certain ways, incomprehensible thing that even adults don't necessarily know how to walk with or grapple with, because it's what's on the other side. Like, we don't know, but we know that
Hmm.
nothing's created or destroyed. So where is it? And these are
Hmm.
obviously very big questions, but I'm curious to hear your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, just good to feel you and your journey with grief from that younger time
Mm-hmm.
too. Um, my my experience or what I comprehend with it is that it can be similar in a way to I guess what I'm feeling is as a child, if you are sexually abused, you don't really have say in the matter and you don't understand, and it's a lot of energy for a child to comprehend, and especially as the body's still growing. So it feels like what trauma is like too much, too soon, too fast, but that's like amplified as a child who doesn't know how to make logical sense of it. So I guess I bring that piece in because I feel it's similar yet not the same, but it's like it's just too much for our little nervous system to comprehend, to make sense of. Even if an adult were to try to explain it to us, it's like it still won't land for us. So it's how to meet the child in that. Um, and I guess what arises is that confusion would be there, would be alive, causing like, things to not fire up as much through that developmental time in the brain. I feel like that's why in school I wasn't able to go at the same speed as a lot of the other kids because there is so much that was not firing up in the same way with my brain. Um, Missing that main attachment figure, but also trying to digest that big information. And I feel that my body, and maybe similar with you in some way, went into that freeze response of like, I can't fight because I'm a child. I can't fight, what's going on. So the safest thing the body knows to do is freeze. And that's like a part of the body is shutting down. Not all of the organs are working in that same sufficient way as maybe a normal child would if they didn't have that same experience confront them. So that's my understanding of it, and physiologically, I feel that's a big part of why I don't want to say that I have this, but I have a flavor of Raynaud's disease, which is that my body gets cold a lot faster than most people I know, and I'll stay in that cold state, and it can be numb and painful. But especially as I was a child, this showed up where I was constantly cold, and that's actually a connection to being in the freeze state.
I was gonna say you're literally freezing. Like it's a
I'm literally freezing. Yeah, so it's like the blood isn't moving in the same way, the heart isn't pumping in the same way. Things are just a little bit slower. That was happening in my system. That's what I comprehend, and I feel this also connects to my womb and my cycle when I get my bleed. Since I first had my bleed when I was 13, I've had excruciating pain. And it's something I'm still unwinding and working with. You know, the healing journey is spiraling, it's not like a completion point. So, this has been an ongoing teacher for me, my womb and her pain and how she expresses. And I feel again there's something there that's like it's stuck, it's frozen, and it's connected to this younger time where things weren't moving as much or tension gets built up. And that tension in our body gets built up because of our trauma, because of our pain not having that completion point. It's like the bracing and then not having, you know, the full yeah, release or ending point of what was needed.
yeah. And so I'm wondering this completion point because I remember one sister shared with me that in order for an emotion to really move through and complete, we need to come back to laughter. And so that's been, I remember her telling me that, and I've been like practicing that anytime I have a really big emotional dip, and I'm like, okay, like letting myself move through it and noticing when the laughter comes and just being like, okay, amazing, we've come full circle here. But I'm wondering how we can also allow this completion, if not laughter, maybe another way to come through. Because if we're in that brace point, it can be so difficult when the emotions are so big. And if we're by ourselves or if we're in an environment that doesn't feel safe, how is it that we can allow the emotions to move through our body so that we aren't stuck in a freeze or even a flight or a fight or a fawning space? You know,
Yes.
what are some things that we can do when we're noticing that we're bracing, however the bracing shows up, again, whether fight, flight, freeze, or fawn?
Yeah, thank you for this question and bringing that in.
Hmm.
So beautiful, so important. Yeah, and I just want to come back to the laughing, how it's actually a big part of somatic work.
Hmm.
In all of my sessions, especially with my continuous clients, laughter is such an important piece because it allows the system to expand, to free up. And then there's that relational component, which is number one in somatic work. It's all about the relationship. So when myself and a client can share that laughter together after moving through a big piece, it's like there's the resource, you know, there's the freeing of vitality and movement, there's the out breath, and there's that joy and liberation that we're meant to feel as humans. And just to share that in those places of really digging deep, it's so important. So I love that you brought that in.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of my work too, that I like to integrate into my circles and how I
Yeah.
hold space is like bringing in the play. Let's not make it so serious. Even when we're going into those really tender places, let's take a pause and be a little bit silly or shake our tongue out or whatever that is to
Yeah.
just bring in a bit of that joy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
And
important.
what a powerful, beautiful way to honor our grief as well and honor those that have transitioned as you've described, you know, and that are doing spirit work in a different way and bringing that laughter and there was a long time that I didn't think I would smile or laugh again. And then when I
Yeah.
started to, the guilt that would come up of like, how can I be
Right.
happy? Floyd's gone. And
Yeah.
then being like, no, I'm I'm laughing and in this laughter and this animation, I'm honoring him.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I'm bringing to this altar of my body, right? That
Mm,
is the laughter, that is the joy. And especially in like a mother child dynamic where the child goes, I still have his DNA in my body.
yeah.
I mean, and you still have your mother's DNA. And so to
Yeah.
laugh and to bring joy, and even for you to bring that belonging in your circles where you're bringing women together and all of them is allowed to show up, not just one piece
Yeah.
or not just another, but your mother's DNA is experiencing that belonging,
Mm,
like in a very human, real way,
mm,
and yeah, just to thread that in as well.
so important.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important, even when we're recalling our passed on loved ones, really remembering, those beautiful moments, but even that the smells really stand out. That's that one sense that really stays with us the most. And for me, like, I don't really remember so much about my mom, but the smell of her perfume stayed with me. And but it's also like, can we remember their laughter? And I'm so grateful my dad got so many home videos, recorded a lot of videos of her that I have, and I'll watch sometimes just to feel her because I don't remember. I don't remember when I was 3 and under. Like, that's a really hard time to bring back in the memory, but the body remembers. Um, yeah, and I'll just come back to your question and also touch into those trauma responses. So you said fight, flight, freeze, and fawning, and just to share the fawning as a new trauma response for people who don't know is that people pleasing and accommodating others before ourselves, and it's actually a way to keep ourselves safe. And a lot of people do this, including myself. I did this a lot. Yeah, seems to be, and it seems to be more of a female thing, but men do it as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And it's just a mechanism that we have, to keep ourselves safe. Just like my little one kept herself safe by going into her freeze response.
hmm,
And then I'll say within the emotion and how it can move and find that completion point, um, I'll just share that, I went to different psychologists, therapists, counselors as a child, and then I took breaks and it felt like it wasn't getting anywhere. And then I noticed, throughout my life where one memory is like my dad told me that someone at his work had their dad pass away, and I just cried and cried. I didn't even know who they were. I just felt that deep empathy, and that was also that outlet for me to feel and to process my own grief. So it's interesting with grief how we can feel like through others' grief our own, and it can bring that up. And it kept happening, but in a really big way. And so when it's almost like exaggerated or very activated, that's when it's like, oh, there's something to turn in towards within ourselves to look at. And I didn't know that at the time. When I was a teenager, we had to watch something about drinking and driving, and there was a video of people dying through car accidents of drinking and driving, and I just cried and cried, and I could not even stay for the presentation, and I was in that like hyperventilating, shallow breath breathing, and I think I almost fainted as well, but I just remember I had to go home because I was just so sad about that situation. Again, didn't know who they were, but it was that outlet to grieve. And then I noticed, like, oh, there's a pattern there. And what a blessing. There's these different options or experiences that's mirroring my own experience to feel, to heal. And that was the time where it was like, okay, I need to start finding more help, more professional help.
hmm,
And coming back to this completion of the emotion and the feeling, it's like, so, how do we stay curious and in relationship, as you said, with those feelings that come up? So with grief, for example, how do we notice it show up in the body and give it some space to be felt, to slow down, to breathe into those sensations that are there, to not want to change anything, not want to fix anything, and just allow. And can we do that in relationship or on our own? But personally, I feel that grief is meant to be shared with others. I feel it's not the best idea to go into it so much on our own. Obviously, it will arise in its own way. But I personally feel there can be like, oh, it's here, and I'll give some space to it. And like, what are my relationships that can hold me in this? Or can I call upon? Can I put a pause to it, box it up to come back to it later? And that's the important part, is we're not just shoving it away and it's gone. It's always going to be there. I'm always going to have grief in my system, in my body, and it will naturally just come up. And so it's just, how do we keep building that relationship with it over time and ask it what it needs? You know, what would be supportive for the grief at this time?
Mm-hmm.
What does the grief want to share with us at this time? And what is it trying to express to us? If there is a sound of the grief, how would it come through? And I think that's an important one. It doesn't just have to come out through words or sharing our story.
Mm-hmm.
It can also come out through a big sigh, or maybe it's just sobbing. You know, maybe there's a movement that wants to happen. And grief can have that kind of parasympathetic, kind of lower energy, lower frequency. In a way it can bring us into that collapse state, or even a sense of depression. The body can actually be more weak. The muscles are more weak. It's that slow heart rate, you know.
Digestion slows or stops. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly,
In my
yeah.
own journey, I've noticed like just this a lack of desire to eat, and really honoring that as well, and choosing instead to drink like, like adding green powder into water or bone broth or something where I'm still receiving nourishment.
Mm,
But honoring that, like, okay, I'm probably not very hungry because my digestion has slowed. And it kind of, my
yeah.
appetite has been doing this where sometimes I am more hungry, usually around my bleed is like I'll just be starving.
Yeah.
But then like I'll dip a little bit and I'm like, okay, like that's and not looking at it as something as like a symptom of something wrong that I need to fix or go to a doctor for necessarily, but noticing like, oh, my body is taking care of me, and my body and my nervous system and my emotions and my spirit are working in tandem. They are serving
Yeah.
one another. They're in relationship with each other. And again, it's just more information that I'm receiving here. And how can I work
Mm,
with it without trying to force too much either?
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a beautiful titration too, of like, okay, I'm not that hungry, but I'll have bone broth,
Hmm.
you know, or I'll just have a little bite to eat, or whatever that is, to still bring in that nourishment, but honor what's true and what's there. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So going back to your journey and your path, so we were kind of exploring your childhood a bit with grief and losing your or having your mother transition, and then having your stepmother transition, all within like 5 years or so or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is I mean already a lot, and then having that all
Mm,
happen within that like under 10 years old, under 7 years old brain
yeah.
development space, like that is such a big and impactful thing. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's how I'm hearing that, is that's a really big thing to experience, or big things to experience. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, and it's informed so much of the work that you're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
why you're continuing to do this work. And as you got older, um, yeah, you shared that in the beginning of this call that there was a past fiance,
Yeah.
and then a baby. And I'm wondering if it feels correct to go into those experiences at this time and which one came first and how you want to go
Mm,
about sharing that part of your story.
yeah. Yeah, and I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just share one other piece with my early childhood experience
Absolutely.
digesting that information.
Yes, please.
Because I always had like my mom and my stepmom, their pictures around, and their pictures were very much like in our house, so we could feel them. And there was still kind of like my mom, like a yearning of that motherly love
Hmm.
and how can I connect with them. And it was through my aunt that I was introduced to a psychic healer that was also into connecting to spirits and angels, passed down loved ones. So she was a medium. And that opened up the door for me of like, oh wow, I can connect with her and I want to connect with her. So at a young age, maybe like 7, 8 and on, I was holding seances and doing Ouija boards and doing like a lot of spiritual circles at a really young age to try to tap into that connection to her.
Hmm.
And at the time, I didn't have the awareness of opening the doors too much of what we call in. So now I am more intentional of, creating protection of the space I call in with spirits, and even ancestors. I usually use the wording like the well ancestors, please come. And the ones who want that healing are also welcome too, but to be here in their purest light. So yeah, there's been a shift within that, but that was a big part of my journey. So I'll fast forward now to COVID times, and yeah, pre-COVID, I was in Peru, and I'll just share in one of my ayahuasca sits in the Sacred Valley, I had contact of being one with my mom and actually being in her body, going through the motions of the night she chose to leave. And that helped me understand it a little bit more. Obviously, yeah, the medicine shows us what we need to be shown, and I'm not super attached to it. It's like if the medicine shows me one thing, that's the way.
Hmm.
I stay very curious of, it's all symbology in some way. Um, so that was interesting. And then there was another message that came through that was when I procreate, it's going to be my mother coming through to have this experience of repair,
Hmm.
of giving her the motherly love she didn't receive, and also being the mother that you didn't have through each other. And it was this interesting message that came through with that medicine. And that feels so true in my spirit, soul, heart. And I fully believe in that. And yeah, I yeah, have a lot of reverence for different plant allies that have supported me to also digest and understand more of that spiritual connection and be with these traumas. And then in Peru, I met my fiance at the time, and yeah, we came together, and COVID happened, and then I was actually in Thailand at the time, and he was in Peru, and I needed to go back to Canada, so I didn't get stuck in Thailand. And he needed to go back to America, where he was from, so he didn't get stuck in Peru. And we weren't able to come together because of border separation. But there was a loophole at some park that was like halfway in Washington, halfway in BC, where somehow like you're just able to be in this park um, at the border, and you don't need to yeah, have a passport of any sort. And so we met there, and I think it was the second day that I met him. This was 5 months into our relationship, he proposed to me. And yeah, and he proposed. Yeah, it was really beautiful and it was really fast because we were wanting to come back together. And this was also like a part of the plan to come back together.
Mm.
We went back to our countries and then we found another loophole of meeting in Mexico. We were in Mexico and deepened into our connection with realizing that, yeah, more of our true colors came through and a bit of a trauma bond was happening and some abuse was happening that I was not okay with. So I basically was like, this is not safe anymore and I need to leave. And at the time, like he had lost everything he created in Peru. He was running a community center there and a lot of different offerings. So he was in a really dark place. And when we separated, it was just like, we're done, like, we're not coming back together. And I hadn't heard from him for over a year and a half. And I think it was 2 summers ago, I found out through a friend in Peru that he chose to die. He had some sort of organ failure where he couldn't walk and was suffering big time. And because of the costs of trying to keep him alive in the States and not having the health coverage, he basically was just like, I don't really know the full story, but I'm assuming it was like, this is the way out and I'm done. So I kind of felt that was in the field with this relationship too.
And that
Yeah.
was, I guess, just for clarity, you said that you don't fully know what happened with that, but was this like an independent um, choosing to end life, or was
I
this like the maid, like the assisted, medically assisted?
think it was independent.
Independent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's another another suicide experience in your life of somebody very close.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that was a hard one for me to comprehend because we hadn't been in contact for a year and a half or something, maybe 2 years. And yeah, it's just an interesting one when you don't have any contact and then they're just gone and there's no reminders
Mm,
of him anywhere. And I do feel a call to eventually go back to the Sacred Valley where there are those reminders to revisit that and make more peace with that situation, you know. And there's been a lot of Ho'oponopono prayers and calling in his spirit more in the light. And yeah, and lots of lessons within that relationship for sure. But I felt because of my past, I was able to meet it a lot easier in a way than I would have if maybe I didn't have that experience prior. So I felt, and especially with the somatic tools, I just felt like right away I was calling in a sister, asking for what I needed to be supported, connecting with the elements, the water at the time, and then, you know, just allowing the feelings to be there and staying curious, grounding myself at the same time. That's been an ongoing one for sure to keep feeling and being with.
right. And so you were you doing somatic work before he passed away? And like when did like how's the where's the timeline on that?
Yeah, he introduced me to somatic work.
Wow.
He was the initiator for that, and he was the initiator for gene keys as well. He was a gene key reader.
Okay.
Um, so that was an interesting one. And but I just got a little taste from him. And then, yeah, I had already done my somatic trainings and my counseling work by this point. So I felt quite equipped
Mhm.
with being with it, and I feel like it's still like not fully digested until I go back to that land where we were. But it feels like just a glimpse in time sort of thing.
And then, so do you feel that we can ever fully digest the passing of someone or the grief of someone? Or is that, you mentioned the spiral, and spirals are so, like, that's just such a medicine symbol for me,
Yeah.
and I do carry this, I guess, piece of, I don't know, this understanding that may evolve, it may change, but that grief isn't something that really goes away. It's just the way that we relate to someone that we can't see or touch in the same way that we used to. And it's not always tears or anger or feeling, you know, disassociated or sad even. It's sometimes joyful, sometimes, there's a lot of humor there. Sometimes there's, other pieces. And, I
Mm.
shared this experience even with a few sisters where I saw a t-shirt, and um, it just said, it was a picture of Freud, the doctor, and it just said, and then like his face was black and white, and then there was like his head was the prism, and so there was white light coming in one side and a rainbow coming out the other, like the
Oh,
dark side of the moon, and it said Pink Freud, the dark side of your mom. And I was like, oh my God, my
whoa.
son is the funniest spirit in the world. And of course, that's how he's gonna like reveal himself, is through this like cosmic joke kind of thing. And it was just so funny, and so even that, like I had this big belly laugh, and I was like, this is grief
Mm.
too. Like, this is grief.
Yes.
And so I do carry this belief that grief, we don't heal grief and it goes away. It's, we revisit it in different seasons, in different ways, with different awarenesses and understandings and tools. So in terms of digesting or integrating grief or death, what do you mean by that? Is there a point that we can ever be like, okay, we're done with this, and then then we just carry on?
No, definitely not. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's just gonna be one of those. Yeah, it'll always be tender. Then it will show up in different expressions, as you said, and different symbols, different messages. Um, yeah, I guess to clarify more with Nick, the person who I was engaged with, who passed on from suicide, is it was harder for me to comprehend that death because there was such a great distance. And it felt like, how we go through these different phases, and it's like, that was a different life ago. Like, that's what it feels like. That's what Peru and that time felt like. It was like a whole different Amber. Um, for me to really, I guess, really open up to the wells of grief, to really, like, yeah, just even rest into the grief more fully, to expand into it perhaps, would be to go back to that land. Like, I really feel it's hitting that land where I had those memories, where I had that relationship, or even going back to Mexico in that specific place where we lived, where I can just like feel like, okay, we were here together. Whereas he never came to Canada, like, and so we didn't have that same experience, but I feel it will get more activated when I go return to those lands. And I was resistant to even going back to those lands because of that experience and those memories. And now I'm just finally at the point of like, I am ready to go visit these lands and be with his spirit more fully, to know this is where our bodies merged and had that sense of oneness and heart connection and deep love. Um, and to honor, the dark parts of that too, which was great medicine for me to learn better boundaries and the gifts. Like, he opened me up to somatic work, which is a big part of my journey, and he really believed in me and helped set off a lot of my work. So I really do honor his spirit in that too. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
And so, of course, I don't want to wrap up anything without also hearing about, you named her Nova. Yeah,
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 thanks for bringing her in. It feels like a beautiful kind of full circle.
yeah.
So Nova came in actually in that time of COVID. I think it was 2020. But I had met Nick, yeah, the months prior. Then COVID happened. Then we were in Mexico for the summer, and then I went back to Saskatchewan where my parents are, and I landed there, and within a month, quite fast, I met this other beautiful being who became my partner, and we both really wanted to procreate. And we were kind of holding that prayer every time we were making love. And not that we were like really wanting it to happen at that time, but the spirit chose the time, and our bodies.
Yeah.
And yeah, she came in, and I was just actually sharing the story of her with my current partner now. And I was at one with her for 6 weeks. So, in that kind of 6 week portal of being pregnant. And it's really interesting because yeah, I think it was a week before. I didn't tell anyone, only like him and I knew. And a week before, the doctor said, like, you have a septate uterus, which means your uterus is in a misshape and it's not going to be able to grow the egg fully. And it's likely you're going to have a miscarriage and continuous miscarriages, and there's a surgery for that, la la la. So I had that already fear in my mind of like, that's not going to happen, but I'm still really scared. And the night before it happened, I dreamt of being shot. And and that night, I actually read about people's stories, women's stories who had this experience of miscarriage after miscarriage. And it was just the fear was so alive in my system. And then, yeah, the next day I was actually on my own when the fetus fully came out into the toilet. And we froze the fetus and then we buried it at this beautiful sacred lake under this tree. And when we buried it and had the ceremony for her, my partner at the time was just like, it was a girl and her name was Knova. Like, he just, I don't know, intuitively felt that come through. And I've just, yeah, trusted that that was what it is, and connect with her, and also like honor her spirit for knowing it wasn't the right time. It wasn't meant to be with him for sure. Wasn't meant to be at, yeah, with that land. And I feel that to be so true, and I'm really grateful. And it's still a very hard experience to have a miscarriage or even an abortion. And I just, yeah, I really am happy this is a part of this talk because so many women go through that and hold that shame or hide it. Like I was hiding even being pregnant. And it's a lot to carry, and it's important to share our story with that and connect to the spirit of that baby.
Yeah. Yeah, so many women are silent with this pain, and it's just so challenging when we're holding it alone. And this is where, yeah, this coming together in this relational, whether it's, sacred dialogue or in therapy or whatever it is that we're doing, but just that we don't have to hold it alone. And really and truly, we're not walking this path by ourselves. There are so many women that are navigating these things. And I'm wondering, so when the doctor told you that you had, they said septic uterus,
Yeah.
was this before you got pregnant? You were informed of this, or was this when you were pregnant?
When I was pregnant, when they confirmed I was pregnant, I got the ultrasound and everything. And then I went to specialists months later, and they said, you don't have that. Your uterus is actually super healthy. So that was an interesting one in
Yeah.
the end.
Well, this is where, because before you said, I don't want to say that I have um, Raynaud's, right?
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, this is where I think saying like, oh, there's some symptomology presenting that is similar to maybe this disease or this thing, but saying
Yeah.
I have this or I can't do this or, all of these, the phrasings, the words that we choose may not change the world, but it does impact in so many ways. And even you said that you carried a lot of fear, and how much,
Yeah.
yeah, how much fear and discomfort and like that you were holding even while pregnant, and now learning that that's not the case. And yeah, there's
Yes.
just so many layers here. And I'm curious if there's anyone that is listening that has experienced miscarriage. I mean, you shared that you froze the fetus and you had this ceremony, right? And as a ceremony facilitator, um,
Hmm.
this is such a big part of your life. And I don't want to put, again, words in your mouth, but um, I'm curious if there would be any advice or any pieces of anything that you'd want to share with any woman listening that's navigated a miscarriage. Because I know for myself, I've had women compare their miscarriages with my journey, and they're like, well, it's smaller than yours, and it's not
Right.
as it's this piece of minimizing comes up. And I'm like, no, like everyone's journey is unique, and grief is grief is grief is grief is grief, and
Yeah.
there's no need to compare. And so I'm curious, from your perspective as a ceremonial embodiment facilitator and a somatic therapist, how would you encourage women and men to show up to, yeah, miscarriage or suicide or loss or grief, or any of these themes that we've just explored, and think, this journey that you've spoken into? Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for bringing in this piece of not comparing.
yeah,
That's so important. And again, it's like, it's not, yes, the experience is important, and our nervous systems comprehend in different ways. And it's like a big backlog of, what our past experience is. It could be other traumas that get activated. It could be generational, ancestral. Like, there's so many pieces. So I think just to validate, as you said, whatever we feel is true and it's meant to be felt, and there's no need to compare to anyone's story, and it all needs space to be felt, to be held. I would encourage those that are listening who have experienced anyone transition or miscarriage or abortion to really make this space, this word space, slowing down, pausing, like these are all somatic words too, but also ceremonial words, to create your own ceremony. And if you don't know what that means, it's like it can be anything. Like you were saying, the altar for you is your body. The altar for me is like a candle and crystals and sweetgrass in my mom's pitcher. And it could be for you, for someone listening, it's like to connect to a passed on loved one. It's making their favorite meal and dedicating that meal to them and like enjoying it with them, maybe lighting a candle with that dinner. It's like in reverence for them, welcoming them into that, or watching a home video where they're laughing and you can laugh with them, or watching something that's sad to activate those feelings of sadness to come through if it's harder to access. But I truly feel that ceremony is the most important. And I would say to create that ceremony, it's like calling in your allies, and that's physical and, spiritual, but definitely having like one or two relationships that feel like they're strong anchors for you. It could even be an animal. And going out in nature, maybe to the river, maybe to a body of water, maybe just being in the forest, and really making that space to settle into the breath, to come into the body, and to feel your heart. Sometimes it's just putting a hand on your heart, and then to have the intention of the ceremony. It's like we're intending to be here to honor our passed on loved ones.
Mm.
And so you can open that space for the ones that are joining you to also tune into their angels or their passed on loved ones or their ancestors, or maybe it's just like, no, I really want the focus to be with me and my passed on loved one, and just own that,
Mm.
to receive that, to have the focus on you and them, and to maybe like me, like to create a spot to have an extra pillow or cushion for them, and maybe placing a symbol there. I feel like tangible symbols are important. For me, it's my mom's picture and an amethyst crystal. For others, it may be something else that reminds you of that person. And just opening and listening, nature really supports that. Maybe it's playing a song they really love and just allowing those feelings to come up. And then also inviting in touch if that feels okay for you. It's like, okay, you have your allies there with you, and can they just have a hand on your legs or have a hand on your heart? And can you also invite in, that spiritual support to feel they're there with you? And how does the body respond when you invite in that spiritual support? How do you know that they're here with you? Where would they be? What's their facial expression? Can you imagine their eyes or whatever that is for you, their laughter? And yeah, just lengthening that out. I would really invite that ceremonial time to be timeless, to be with that. For me, I love working with plant allies. So, yeah, having cacao or blue lotus or rose. Bobin Sana is a beautiful one also for grief to work with. Um, Bringing in those allies or whatever
Motherwort,
you to, motherwort,
hawthorn, yeah.
hawthorn, yeah. Having those allies there, making an offering if that feels true for you, and just listening and just feeling, and then if it feels right, sharing what's happening in the present moment in your body. It's like, oh, right now again I'm feeling that tightness there. I'm feeling the tears, and I'm scared as these tears come up that I won't be able to stop. And it's like having those allies hold you in that. It's like, we got you. Having them say words that support you.
Yeah, I feel like ceremony really creates that masculine counterpart, that container for our
Yeah.
emotions to be held. So even when we are in spaces on our own, it can allow the unfolding to happen, but it's held and it's safe and it's okay that it's here, and um,
Mm.
yeah, there's just so many pieces, so many layers, and that's what I find prayer is so helpful for, to pray
Yes.
before something and after something and creating that bookend of like, okay, and in
Mm.
between, I can fall apart. In this space, I am held. I'm okay to cry forever if I need to, while also being aware that emotions by nature are transient. Nothing
Yes.
will last forever. No joy, no laughter, no rage, no tears. They're all
Yes.
going to flow and move and evolve and shift if we allow them to, and if we give them that
Yes.
space to. And even, I remember a friend telling me, and you could speak more into this, um, but activating, like touching and massaging the outside of our arms, they are,
Mm.
it's the containment muscles or something like that, and even like the outside of our legs. So when we're feeling
Yeah.
really dysregulated, touching these parts of our bodies, our feet, yeah, just the outside, it contains our nervous system so that we can feel all that there is to feel, but be safe
Mm.
in that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And in somatic work, especially in person, it's like that's how the therapist would hold you. If you have that relationship and consent, it's like the therapist would hold those areas and bring in that contact to make you like really rest into that and have that body support and have that co-regulation, which is so important beyond the words again. And I feel, yeah, you made a good point about the ceremony. It's so important to create the space, the time, to go into this.
Mm.
And I would just really, really encourage that there's like a huge, huge amount of resources that is built upon before going into that sort of ceremony.
Mhm.
If you're doing it if you're doing it with just a few friends, that they know what your resources are, that they have their own resources, and that you know what yours are. But it's like, okay, I know at this place on the land that if I go wash my face in this area of the river, that's going to be a resource for me when it gets overwhelming, or this particular sound of the rattle helps to resource me, or this particular breath down to my feet helps to resource. It's just that's the biggest thing with somatic work too, is building an immense amount of resources so it almost overpowers what the trauma is, so we can meet it with more resilience and capacity.
Absolutely. And I find as well, when we honor our grief in this way, whether it's with ceremony or somatic work, and I've described this to various people, is that the way that I grieve is how I mother my son now. And so every time
Mm,
I show up and I invest time and space and breath and, you know, all of these pieces like ritual feathers, like because I do have his ashes upon an altar with,
right.
flowers and crystals and all of these things. Every time I sit there and somebody gifts me with something and I say, Floyd, look, like I'm investing in this relationship and I have somewhere for my grief to go. So it's not just
Yeah.
sitting stagnant and
Mm,
unmoving. Like the relationship doesn't end because his heart isn't beating anymore. The
yes.
relationship keeps going and continues on, and I get to not take the lead, but I get to show up in all of these ways where it's difficult, because instead of changing a diaper, I'm lighting a candle. Instead of singing
Yeah.
lullabies, I'm speaking prayers. Though I do sing
Yeah.
lullabies, but like it's just different, but it's still a relationship. And it's the way I'm in relationship with my grief is the way I'm in relationship with him. And I want to
Yeah.
ensure as well that any future children that I have, I get to love them as they are, but I'm still making time to be with him and I'm still making time to mother him. And whether I'm mothering him or you're being the daughter to your mother and saying, hey mom, like I have a pillow for you, or a spirit plate if we're having a big celebratory dinner, like here's a little bit for you too. Like I love you and you're here. And I can feel my throat tightening as I say that, and I can feel the wetness behind my eyes because
Yeah.
it's just it's love. It's this very difficult form of love, but it's love, you know. And so I'm curious what your definition of grief is, if you have one.
Mm,
And this is something that I've asked different clients too. I'm like, how do you define grief? Because there's not really one agreed upon global definition,
right.
and this is something I'm constantly revisiting. Yeah, so I'm curious what your definition right now of grief is.
Yeah, and I just want to also just really acknowledge your beautiful tears and just feel you in the potency of your words and what you just shared. It was so powerful, and I'm so grateful to be here with you and to witness you, and to feel that mirror effect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And just for anyone listening, like how powerful tears are. It's not weak. It's not weak. And the more that we can just normalize crying in front of others, the more it just gives that safety. And there is a release, when we let those tears flow, there's something that opens up inside. So
hmm
whenever you can, allow those tears to flow. Try not to swallow them
yeah,
or hide them.
yeah. And just on that thread, before we get into the definition, I do want to share that tears have chemical makeup. And I remember seeing an image of tears under a microscope and the difference between tears of anger, tears of grief and sadness, tears of joy and tears from like an onion, like when tears are coming from cutting an onion,
Yeah.
and they all look different. And the reason they look different is because there's different chemicals and hormones being released. And if we don't allow those tears to come out, then they're staying somewhere in the bustle, in the muscles, in the bones, in the fascia, in the body. And so this is also where like sweating, salt water is such medicine. And to, in the practice of when we allow ourselves to cry and sweat as a practice, to have a practice of hydration and
Mm,
of drinking that water and adding electrolytes or a bit of salt or, a dash of
yes.
baking soda, all these little things, because it is a big process of dehydration and it's healing, but we also need to replenish. And that's that resource piece you keep mentioning. And there's so many various resources. What is resourcing for our nervous system? And there can be meditation or dancing or eating good food or going for a swim, but also hydration, like a very basic biological
Yeah.
need, but it's so so helpful. Yeah.
Especially with good water. If you
Mm-hmm.
can get good water.
Exactly. Yeah, some spring water. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
coconut water is
coconut
also
water.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. Beautiful. And I'll just, so many things to share, but I just want to say another piece. If you're not ready to go into a whole ceremony with your grief, I do find bath rituals, and I know you relate to this, being so supportive. It's like you're just with yourself, you're with your body, and you're with the water. Like, water is one of the key elements for grief to hold and support us, as all of the elements are: fire, earth, air, ether, all of it. But water for sure, especially a nice long bath with salts or magnesium, lighting a candle, having beautiful music on, and maybe singing or toning, or again bringing in that picture of a passed on loved one, or calling upon their spirit in some way, and just giving yourself permission to cry, but to also have the resources nearby too. And that's been a big support for me of letting it flow. Sounding and singing, I feel like, is a great one to come back into resource too.
And something about the bath as well. I remember in my studies learning that our body somatically, right, when we're in the water, in submerged, especially if the lights are dimmed, it brings this cellular memory of being in the womb and being held
Yeah.
and having all of our nourishment. So, regardless of what our experiences were in the womb, because we were attached by an umbilical cord, we didn't know what it was like to lack, to not be hungry, to not be held, to not be uh, to not have those containment muscles activated. Like it's contained, right? And so oftentimes I'll bring the drum, and I've had I was in when I was in labor, I was in the water, and so I've only been in the bath once since being in labor because it was really, really triggering.
Right.
But I've been in the bath and I wasn't even that triggered, which was amazing. But
Yeah.
bringing the drum into the bath to bring that heartbeat energy as well and have the I am held in the womb. I am a child of the universe. I'm held. I am so provided for. I am here. I am cared for. I'm loved. I'm safe. So even
Yes.
if emotions come up, I am safe to feel. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah.
Definitely feel that motherly holding in the womb
Hmm.
when I, yeah, have the music and the low lighting. It's so special. Definition of
Yeah.
grief. Yeah, my definition of grief is, yeah, I guess the word sorrow comes up, and the words unique rawness and vulnerability comes up too. Because I really do feel it's a unique journey for each of us. It's not my grief looks, yeah, it really is. Like, my grief looks different from your grief than it does for others' grief. And like I said about my brother, like, his grief is very different from my grief. Yeah, so I really feel it's tender. I can feel almost everyone who is with that part of grief has that sense of tenderness there. But as you said, it has many different expressions where grieving can also be connecting to laughter or, connecting to play or yeah, sensuality and still inviting in the essence of what we're grieving in. Grief can be angry, grief can be messy, and grief can be, it just can be so many things, but it does feel like there's a sense of rawness and layers. It feels like there's many layers to to grief, and it feels like an emotion, a feeling, a part of us that no one will ever fully understand but ourselves. No one will ever get it to that same degree that we do. And no matter how much we try to explain it or express it, it's kind of sacred in that way because it's just ours. It's ours. And and it's valid. And I think that's a really key piece too that we do a lot in somatic therapy is just validating everything that is there that comes up. It's allowed to be there and it makes sense that it's there. And let's just honor that it's there and and validate. Of course there's going to be grief there if there is that time of, someone transitioning in life. Of course, that's going to come up in different ways. Of course, there will be that tenderness and rawness and vulnerability. Of course, there will be tears.
And so as a somatic therapist, what are some tools that you can offer or that people at home can do with, by themselves or with loved ones? You've already mentioned quite a few things, ways that we can support grief, but if there's anything like maybe two or three things off the top of your head that you would like maybe some people to walk away from being like, okay, I can take this with me and put it into practice today.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the one that arises is like, what is your relationship to grief? I would just invite listeners, viewers to really ponder that question beyond the mind and sit with it in their heart or sit with it by the river or in nature somewhere or with their journal. It's like, what is your relationship to grief? Because, even if it's not grieving about someone who's transitioned, there's a lot of grief to be felt in the world of, yeah, different things that are happening, grief of Pachamama, Mother Earth, of this change that we're witnessing before our eyes. There's a lot to grieve. So we all have that in us. And so I guess I would just invite, yeah, that question to be pondered and then slowing down to feel the somatic experience of that, which would be like really listening with the body. How is that response happen inside when we call upon the energy, the ally, the teacher of grief to be with us? And, what is its symbol? What is its sound? What is an image or message that it wants to share with us? So that would be one piece. And then another piece I would offer is, yeah, to really play with the titration and pendulation if you're experiencing grief when it's really active in your being at this time. I would just invite in, like, yeah, how can you create that pendulation, which is the sandwiching of the resources to then go into it. And if that feels like, whoa, that's already too much to even think about, then maybe call upon a professional to be with you with it because it is lighter and easier to access and hold it with another, especially someone that can really focus in on it. I do feel like our loved ones, our friends can be there with us to a certain degree, but a professional that it's like it's their work, they've studied, they've hopefully integrated it into their body. Um, it's a different kind of focus and holding than it is with friends and loved ones.
Yeah. And this is the type of work that you do. So I also want to um, kind of offer a little like place for you to share, like if somebody is listening to this and they're like, wow, I really love, everything that Amber's talking about. How can they find you? What kind of sessions do you do? What can people expect from the work that you do together? And you are currently accepting clients both in person and online, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I work in person in Nelson and around nature for the time being,
Mhm.
and online. And I do have clients that I've been working with that have had a lot of, yeah, deep, deep trauma and also close loved ones transition in their life. So I naturally attract what I've integrated and embodied and tended to myself. So yeah, it's an absolute honor to hold anyone with that big unbearable experiences of grief. And how I go about this, so I have an hour and a half session because I like a lot of space and slowness, and building that sense of safety and trust is number one. And then if we were beginning a journey together, it would be like, okay, can we commit to a relationship? I don't really like to do one offs, but I do offer those to get a taste. But I mainly like to focus in on clients that are like, let's build a relationship because it does take time to unwind and go into many different layers. So that would be like committing to this journey over time. And through that, it's building the resources is number one. And how do we build the resources in the body? Where are those safe places in the body to stay with, to get to know, to breathe into? Where do you feel that sense of grounding in your body? Where do you feel it in your environment? It's getting to know our power spots, our power songs, those resources that are outside of us, and then resources in the relational field that we would build together. And then slowly applying these somatic tools that takes time. It's like a practice, it takes time to learn them. For people that are really in the mind and not as aware of what's happening in the body, it's going slow to develop those skills over time and to be patient with that. It does, yeah, it's a big transition for a lot of people to come into the body and to really understand how does my nervous system respond in certain relationships? How does my nervous system respond in certain environments? And what's needed to support my nervous system to feel more regulated and resourced, that I can feel calm and yet alert and centered and able to take action. So it's not always about down regulating, but it's about having that like happy medium place where we can still go forth with our dreams and our purpose and still feel like, okay, I got myself and I have the support I need around and inside of me. It's building those tools. And then it's working with the attachment styles of like, how did mom and dad relate to us? You know, what were those behaviors that we learned at a young age of how did they make us feel safe? And how did they express those emotions of anger, of grief, and boundaries? And then how did we adapt to those, different ways of relating that plays out in our adult relationships? There's a lot of fascinating information in that. So yeah, kind of picking apart that and holding that and tending to that and exploring. It's not about an end goal to, as you said, get to this completion line of I'm healed now. It's more just going on an exploration of the inner workings of our body and its intelligence and wisdom, and slowing down to make that space to to listen, to feel, to receive the information, and to find that completion point that it didn't get through those trauma experiences.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing.
It's hard to always sum it up into words. It's you have to experience it, but that's maybe a little taste of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And I know that you've held for another sister and myself, you held like a mini grief ceremony virtually, which was so impactful and so powerful. And yeah, I've been in many circles that you've held, and so I can attest to like just how wonderful she is and beautiful, um, and just as I'm feeling like wrapping up. You mentioned the Ho'oponopono prayer, which for me has been with me on this journey so massively. And I was wondering if maybe you could lead us in a Ho'oponopono prayer to contain this conversation, unless there's anything else that you feel to mention. I will be putting all of your details of where people can find you and contact you and stuff in the description below. So that way, if you want to connect with Amber, you'll have access to her website and her social media and everything, and you'll be able to reach out and do some beautiful
Yay.
somatic work. But if there's any
Thank
final
you.
thoughts, and if you, yeah, feel to lead us through a Ho'oponopono prayer to contain the space, I would love.
Yes, that feels like a nice sealing up of our container today.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'll just also share I do love working with couples as well. I'm very fascinated with couples work and intimate relationships, and I also hold ceremonies. And I do womb tending, so that's another piece that feels important for those that have had miscarriage or abortion or just tending to their womb. I feel that that's always for a woman, something that we could use here and there. Wherever our womb journey is at, it's great to be held in that way. And I do that online and in person, same with the couples therapy. And I'll just speak out my website. So it's groundedwholeness.com. And then my Instagram is at Amber Wolfmoon. So easy to find me, and thanks for putting in that information too,
Mm.
sharing it, and thank you for all the listeners. Um, for the Ho'oponopono prayer, we can all, if it feels right, just drop inside. And dropping inside for me is closing my eyes. If it doesn't feel okay to close the eyes, you can have a soft gaze looking down, inviting one hand to the heart and one hand to your belly or your womb space. Taking a big breath in, a big breath out. Do two more of those, letting out a sound or a sigh on the exhalation, breathing in. Ah. Yeah, letting any movement happen, any wiggles or shakes. Last one, breathing into your belly. Yeah, it feels good to have a little wiggle shake. And just noticing what's happening inside for a few moments. What sensations or feelings are present in your heart, in your belly, and even inviting breath into your back body, feeling that unseen support, spiritual support that has our back. Even if we don't see it, they are here with us. Thank you. Thank you to them. And this prayer is for them, all of our angels, guardians, spiritual helpers, past on loved ones, well ancestors. You could keep your hands on your body or bring your hands to prayer. And letting these words really just penetrate the body and ripple outwards to the ones we are praying for. You can envision the feeling of these that we are praying for, those that we are praying for. And repeating after me, going slow to stay in the body. I am sorry. Taking a breath. Please forgive me. And I like to add on this part, I forgive you. I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much. You can internally speak out the names of your passed on loved ones or whoever you're directing the prayer to. And just noticing the body. Noticing their presence. Maybe even listening to a response from them. Whatever is there, whatever is happening inside, welcoming it, allowing it, and breathing into it. Bringing some touch to those containment muscles, to our body. Either giving a little self-hug, you can sway, you can tap, you can shake. And giving thanks for all of those that have joined us in this ceremony. The listeners, the spiritual helpers, passed on loved ones, angels, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to ourselves for being here and showing up, walking this path to our hearts, to our spirit. And big gratitude and love to you, Emma. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are such a bold, bright, embodied light. And I really am so deeply grateful I get to be with you on our journey together. Thank you for welcoming me in and inviting me in and seeing me. Yeah, it's such an honor to be here. Truly.
Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom, your gifts, your story, the medicine of your grief, of your story, of your path. And there's just so much more that you still haven't even shared. There's, of course, so many layers, but I just thank you for trusting me in holding this and listening and sharing in this space. And I'm just forever grateful for your presence in my life. and for seeing me and for being someone just that, as you said in the beginning, every time we connect, it's just, you know, and I don't know, like we're both 2 4s in human design, sacral generators. So I don't know. I don't know if it's that or what it is, but it's just good every time. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story and your medicine and all of these tools that are just, yeah, so supportive for anyone walking with grief. And thank you to all the listeners for being with us today. I am so forever grateful for you. I bow at your feet and I honor the path that you're walking. You're doing it even when it's hard. And I'm so proud of you. And I'm so proud of you. And yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you to the ancestors, to Mother Earth, to Father Sky, to creation, to God. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Love you. Love you. Love you. To the Tao in which everything is and isn't and flows.